Greetings, this is Capo Daniel, the Pan-Africanist. I recently visited the city of Montreal in Canada, Quebec. This is where the French people, this is the French-speaking part of Canada, and I want to share it with you. Montreal is a very beautiful place and full of history. And I will take you through this journey and share with you my experience. So this city, Montreal, is a city that was built by the French people in 1608. That's when the French people finally they started to settle in what they call the New France. So you have a lot of French people. The French government, they were looking to create more settlement and more colony as their population was growing. So they tried to expand and explore other territory. That is why you find the Americans, the British people in America, British people in Australia, British people in New Zealand. They were not origin from those areas. They migrated there. So the French people wanted to look for new territories. So they came to Quebec, where it is in Canada today, where they used to call it New France. They brought in prisoners and soldiers, about 10,000 of them, with 2,000 women, and forced prisoners to have more children. The more children women could have, they will pay them so that they can expand. So follow me, let's walk through Quebec, through Montreal. I'm going to take you to this historic site and let us learn some very important lessons. The first thing I noticed in Montreal is that they have a strange flag. Wherever I go, there was this strange flag, as you see here, other than the Canadian flag. Voilà, drapeau là. Oh, c'est le drapeau de Québec. Oh, ok. Donc, Québec a son drapeau. Ok. Oh, chaque province a le drapeau. Il y a combien de provinces françaises ou francophones ici à Canada? So with my discussion with this Uber driver, he's telling me that every province in Canada have their own flag. So I'm asking about how many flags, because I know there is just one French province, Quebec, and that is the flag. Okay. Mais les provinces seulement une province francophone. Québec. Oh. Donc ce n'est que Québec qui a le drapeau. Chaque province il a un drapeau. Or to the province le drapeau. So why coming from Africa and in the Cameroons where the Amazonian flag or many other flags in Africa is a very big issue with the governments cracking down, executing people who hoist flag and stuff like that? It's very interesting to me that everywhere I go, I could see the Quebec flag, even more than I could see the Canadian flags, even on government buildings. So where I am going now is the oldest street in the Northern America, that is in Montreal. It's called St. Paul Street. I want to go where this beautiful town, this beautiful French province in Canada was first created, where the French people landed and built this wonderful city. So accompany me, let's take a look. The oldest city in North America. And the vieux vie ici à Nord American. So pardon my broken French and even don't mind my broken English. I speak pidgin English for those who don't know me. So I'm just testing ground on my history, Canadian history, with this driver. And let's go. So finally, I arrived there. As you can look at the soil, the ground is not the tar. It's made with the blocks. This ground were put there hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And in front of me was a beautiful chapel, a Catholic church. It's called Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours. It was opened by one lady. She was a nun called Margareta Bourgeois. She came here. This is just opposite the river where the French people landed. She came in this new settlement to try to set up a community of Catholics where she would preach about the Virgin Mary, and that is how she built this building. Very beautiful place. Very beautiful city. So her initial plan was to come here and spread Catholicism, her own version of Virgin Mary, and also to teach. She was teaching French planning to teach French to the local people who were indigenous of Canada or North America when she first arrived there. And that is how this settlement was built. They built this first street along in front of the church where she
landed.
landed.
The oldest city in North America, and it was founded in 1614, if I'm not mistaken. That's probably almost 400 years old. 400 years ago. Imagine our palaces in Mancon, the Mancon Palace, the Bafut Palace, the kingdoms in Bakweriland, Bayangi, Fontem, and all of our villages. How can we, if we trace back the settlement of those villages, how long do you think they have been there? How many generations of funds do your village have? So imagine 400 years ago, these buildings you see all around here, this street, those churches were all built 400 years ago. Look at the buildings, built with stones, rough edges. Very beautiful place. Warehouse. There is an old train station that I'm going to take us there to see. It's a very beautiful city. There are not very high points of view where one can stand and get a view on the street, on the city, or very tall buildings like in Toronto. But it's a very beautiful city. So I'll take you to the St. Mary Basilica. It's one of the oldest churches in the world. Very beautiful church. Let's go there and take a look around this beautiful old city.
But before we go to the Basilica, maybe we first visit this Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours.
The city is called Paul something. I'll look at the record. Imagine when they came. Building all these things, making pavement, creating roads. I'm not sure if they had created vehicles at that time, but all of these things would have been built with manual labor. That shows you that we don't need modern technology to develop our cities, our towns, our villages.
So let's enter the church. This is Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours. It was built by Margaret Bourgeois, a nun. So let's get into the church. This church is also her burying ground because she was buried in the middle, near the altar of this church. So this lady came to this place in 1771 and started this community that was transformed into what we see, this beautiful city. That was when this church was built in 1771. So the beauty of this church is the artwork. You could imagine the pain and the time to organize people to do this type of work, to convince people to come along, or maybe force people, I don't know. But to build something like this magnificent, should have been a wonderful coordination of planning, designing, and stuff like that, with basically very low technology. That we have all the technologies that were available to them. And we should be able to do this type of thing. If they could do it in one place in the world, why not in Africa, you know? So at one point, when the British people tried to take over this territory, they burnt part of this church, and it was rebuilt a little bit later, and the woman died. She had a very famous statue that she always carried, which is the statue of the Virgin Mary of the Catholic Church. It is there. It is still there. She prayed with it. They say it's a miraculous article, and it has been preserved. You know, people preserve their culture, even in religion. So in Africa, we tend to look at religion as just something that is strange, but the white people adopted something and they make it peculiar to their own culture, and they use it to promote their own culture, their own people who are very historic, who have played major part in their history. If you could bury somebody in the church in Europe or in America, why can't that be possible in Africa? So these people are honored for their part they played for their community, and we should be able to do the same. We don't tend to look at history as church as history, or this sort of things as part of our history to preserve them. But look at how beautiful the white people are doing. So this is where this woman was buried, and a lot of people come there every day to see her grave. She was buried here. She founded this church, and later on it transformed into this beautiful city. And we can remember Alfred Seca Monument and our history and those things. What have we preserved? What have we built around those things? So anyway, let's go into the in the city.
Street, one of the oldest streets here in Montreal. This is where the city Montreal was founded some 300 years ago. Really beautiful, just like Europe, I think, where you have places where people sit down and take tea. Europeans are obsessed with tea, and when they found sugar, it was that their obsession to make their tea sweet that they came to Africa and start taking our people to Haiti to produce sugar cane. Anyway, that is a story for another day. A very, very beautiful city. Very beautiful city. So imagine people building all this structure over 300 years ago. We have a long way to go. We need visions to be our own country. This is Notre-Dame-de-Bon-Secours. So this one are their own old town, their own version of old town.
So this market also was built around that time, over 300 or 200 something years ago. And these technologies in doing these things, we have them all available.
They say this market is start for 1844. Now William Fortner we build this building. He design and make it there like the big building for this place. So then complete the building for 1860. So if people don't fit big house like this one, they take like 20 years for big house. So no say well, development not easy. So this is the church from this angle. There's a marché. So this one is Old Town. Call this
So all
Old
this side was the
Montreal.
landing ground at the shore, because ahead of this place is the sea where
Back there for
the French
amusement
people
for
landed
children.
here to settle in
Very
this
beautiful
part of the northern
Very
hemisphere.
beautiful. Beautiful city, European city. I can call it European because it's really the architecture, the building, the design, everything is European for real.
So now I will take you guys, let's go to the Basilica. It's a very famous big building, very beautiful building that was built by the Catholic Church and is owned by the Catholic Church here in Montreal. And for those who do not understand the difference between basilica, you know, people are used to cathedral. Cathedral is usually where you have the seat of a bishop, but the basilica is a very special building. It's a building that has been named by the Pope as highly important based on its historical and cultural importance, and sometimes it adds and beauty. So this is the Basilica, a very, very beautiful church. It was built in 1884. That means 140 years old. You can imagine the technology that was available during that time, and they could build this building. And I'm sure we have better technology today in our country and in Africa than they did. So let's go inside. You have to pay actually about $20 Canadian dollars to get in. That is about 10,000. And imagine how many people visit this place a day. Hundreds of people. So this is Notre-Dame Basilica. It's actually a church. So even though it's a touristic site, it is actually a church. You can see it can fit about 10,000 worshippers. And people still worship. The Catholics still perform their mass in this church. So I have to be very respectful. It is absolutely mesmerizing. It's like traveling into the movies in an Hollywood movie setting. It's very beautiful. The artwork, the ceiling, the floor, the decoration. It's just too beautiful. It must have taken a lot of work, a lot of painstaking work. Artists who are specialized. How can you mobilize people who can do artwork to do something that is memorable, that can last beyond their time, that can capture a moment in history of a life of a people and register it for thousands of people, millions of people across the world to share in their experience? So this is just beautiful. And I think in Africa, we can do things like this, even with our own culture. We have missed a lot of opportunity. Talents have come and gone. Myth and mysteries about our continent have come and gone without this type of mark. So we can learn from other generations and other cultures on how to preserve and how to make a historic statement. So just take a look at that. I'm sure you would admire it. You can't really get the whole feeling of just being in the presence of this historic place, imagining millions of people who have gone through benedictions that have been made here and stuff. And of course, church cannot go without offering box. So you have their offering box there. You can put in money. You have their corners for prayers and all those Catholic stuff that Catholics, faithfuls can best appreciate. So I will take a little bit time and talk about the Catholic Church back in our home in former British Southern Cameroon and Bazonia. You know, we have the Catholic Church is divided into what they call ecclesiastic provinces. And in Cameroon, they have 5 ecclesiastic provinces. And in Ambazonia, or the former British Southern Cameroon, you have just one ecclesiastic province, which is called Bamenda. Sometimes you may wonder why La Republique people insult us and call us Le Bamenda, because we are actually Bamenda. If you remember, the British people, when they partitioned our territory, it was divided into 2 provinces, Bamenda and Buea. Bamenda was supposed to be the primary one that is populated and it's more stronger, that can preserve and protect and defend our country. But the British people saw that and they wanted to minimize it, and so they did not appoint a commissioner in Bamenda. That is how Buea was still reinforced as a capital, even though they knew that for Ambazonian to really stand as an independent people, they would need to give it to Bamenda. And that's why you also find out that the Mancon people in particular were also marginalized and suppressed, because the strength of our territory is in Bamenda. So for the Catholic map, it recognized our entire territory as the Bamenda Archdiocese. And under the Bamenda Archdiocese, you now have 4 other dioceses, that is Buea, Kumba, Kumbu, and Manfe. As you know, a cathedral is where you have the bishops and the archbishops, the big Catholic boss in our territories in Bamenda. That is where it houses. So they rule Ambazonia from Bamenda. So this is outside of the Basilica. You can see people, sculpture that memorizes the history of this country, the people that invaded it, the local people. Very, very diverse city. And I want to take you through the city as well, to take you downtown Montreal, so that you can have a better appreciation. Notice that on every rooftop in this city, there is a flag of the Quebec flag. So identity and diversity is respected. The choice of a people are preserved in Canada. It's a beautiful harmony where you have the French minority being given privileges because they are minority, and the English majority. And I think this can happen only in English-speaking world, I guess. So you look at the building, the banks, the court all carry their flag. Imagine if there is a scenario where Ambazonian flags can be tolerated or accepted without any fear by La Republique, or even the Biafran flag or flags of other states. In America itself, you have the various states. This is downtown Montreal, by the way. You can see a very beautiful city, very, very lovely city. that has a touch of England. You see, when you move from the old Montreal, you get into the city center, you now start to see the British touch. It's not so much a European these days, because England happens not to be a European country anymore. It's not part of the European Union. So you get that British touch. You go inside the middle town. I'll take you to Victoria. I think it's Victoria Square. This is Victoria Square. As where in every British territory around the Commonwealth, you always have Victoria. Unfortunately, Victoria is no more in former British Southern Cameroon. It has been changed and everything, and our identity is being undermined, eroded. But I think this is a beautiful city, full of history, full of lessons on how people have been able to live together, preserve minorities. And this is a view from a rooftop, one of my friend's apartment. Very beautiful city. You can see very modernized city, very wonderful place, and I want to share with you this experience. Right up at the far corner, you see the harbor. That's the sea where the settlers here arrived. It's warm. Unlike in Asia and in metropolitan city, this city is not built with skyscrapers. Very few tall buildings here. And of course, I had to go to an African restaurant and have some fufu and jama before I can go. And I met some wonderful people from my area, from Bamenda, of course, from Southern Cameroon. Ciao. Hope you enjoy this trip with me.